Let me start by just encouraging you, if you're able, to do what we do in the classroom at the Graham School, which is to turn on your video. We love interactivity, and we hold a lot of these information sessions with the explicit goal of having this be a part presentation, part true dialogue and discussion aligned with the approach of the program as a whole. For those of you who are so willing, if you want to just chat in where you're Zooming from, and if you have any specific nugget or question you'd like to make sure to learn during the session, we have a few slides we'll be going through and a student that is currently in the program that we'll be speaking with, but we find that the greatest opportunities happen through your questions and curiosity. So let's get started. Welcome to the University of Chicago. We love to start with this visual because this is the place where big ideas are born that change and challenge our world. And this is the place that will be at the center of your universe should you ultimately become a student in the program. While it is a largely online program, as you'll hear, we have residential seminars on this campus where you can come for a condensed week and be part of the extraordinary intellectual environment here. But even over Zoom, as you'll hear, the ideas from this place infuse every aspect of our virtual world. So what we're hoping to do over the course of the next hour is talk about the MLA in a snapshot format to give you a kind of journey into the learning experience, and then to go through some of the timeline and details, and then spend almost half the time in questions. And because we have an intimate group, we really will get to all of your questions over the time left. So please think about your questions and feel free to chat them in throughout. So let me start with a welcome, and I am thrilled that alongside myself, we have two other people who are going to be joining this information session as presenters. And so I'll start by saying I'm Seth Green. I'm the Dean of the Graham School here at the University of Chicago. We have many programs as a school, but the reason that I always try to make these information sessions is that while there are no favorite children, we really consider this to be the jewel of our school, and I dare say our university, because this is the degree where you get to be across the entire university, all four divisions, and then to take classes across all disciplines. And so it is a really special degree, and it's a really special part of the university. And let me now ask Cara Brennan-Alamano to just share a little bit about herself. We'll be talking to her throughout this presentation, but I thought it'd be good for her to just tell a little bit about her background. And so, Cara, can I turn it over to you?
Yeah, happy to, Seth. Thanks. I'm really pleased to be here today. In my daily life, I'm a mother of two and a chief people officer at Lattice, which is a technology company here in the San Francisco Bay Area where I live. I have spent the last 15 years of my career in high growth technology companies on the people side, and prior to that, another 10 years in corporate environments in HR. I've already had a graduate degree in my area of expertise, which is human resources and organizational design, but felt like I wanted to expand into some other areas, and I love learning about a lot of different things. The ability to have a truly quality virtual experience as a student, as well as get to handpick the courses that I want to take, has just been really fun. So happy to chat more about that with you all here.
Thanks, Cara. And Carrie, can we come to you?
Hi, everyone. I am Carrie Dempsey, Director of Recruitment for the MLA program. I joined UChicago not too long ago. I joined back in January, and I decided to come over to the team because I really feel very passionate about a liberal arts education. I feel that it nurtures a way of thinking that is so critical in both our personal and professional lives. And I love that I get to connect students like you with our program every day. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Wonderful. We'll hear more from the Cara and Carrie team coming up. So very excited to come back to each of you. I am going to start by offering a high-level snapshot of the MLA, and I want to start with our statement of who we designed this for, which is for people that are really looking to grow as leaders, as problem solvers, and as communicators through advanced studies in the liberal arts. And foundationally, we believe that the liberal arts have the opportunity to truly help us to think deeper and better. And so it's really designed for people that are looking for what you might almost call a cognitive boot camp at a point in their life and career where they feel like that type of broad inquiry and sharper thinking will really help them to advance personally and professionally. And one of the rationales behind this degree is that as the world is getting more complex and dynamic, and you all see that with the advancement of artificial intelligence and the many other forms of digitization and technological change, we actually are finding that just having a technical skill doesn't last very long, because much of what you might learn in that kind of technical direct education is now increasingly being automated. And what really is essential as we're reaching this moment in time is the ability to think creatively and critically. And often that is best developed in a range of different disciplines and in a way where you're looking at how people across time and space have actually investigated ideas and thought anew about big questions. And so in this transforming world, what we're really trying to do in a nutshell is we're trying to provide a transformative education that involves all divisions and disciplines of the university to fuel your professional and personal growth. The way that we think about how it will help you as a person and as a professional is that there will be 3 ways that you will, so to speak, come out as a better leader in person. First, we hope it will sharpen your synthetic thinking, critical thinking, writing, presenting, and adaptive leadership. And that synthetic thinking you may not have seen before. We often hear the word strategic thinking, but synthetic refers to the idea of taking a lot of information and being able to boil down that complexity into a structured framework. And what we find is that is often the greatest value of being forced into lots of different classes in different areas of study and different ways of investigating, and then having to come out each term with a completed paper and a way of boiling down that subject to a place where you can actually come to synthetic thought. I'll just give an example from someone who has recently been going through a lot of the different elements of the banking irregularities. And what she's described is how she took a cosmology class, and that cosmology class ended with how do you kind of write a paper in 20 pages that kind of provides a snapshot of billions of years of human history. And that as she's sitting there working on an executive memo later on in the financial world, she's finding that a lot of the same skills that she used to try to take all of this information about cosmology and boil it down into a simple paper, she's now applying to try to take all of these different assets and try to tell a unifying story about the situation that they find themselves in at that bank and how they handle this moment. And so the idea of, how do you sharpen your thinking? And even though it's in a domain area that may not be directly related to your profession, it's actually that dynamic that allows you to think in new ways and to grow. And what we find is a lot of people reach a point in mid-career where they've learned their discipline and they are able to really master the core technical aspects of their career. And so in order to grow, it actually can be really helpful to move into domains that are outside of that core area and that test the limits and creativity of your thinking. The second is that you have a chance to specialize. And this is, we'll talk about the curriculum in a moment, a chance provided by the fact that you have many electives. And so we have 3 concentrations in ethics and leadership, literary studies, or tech and society. And it gives you a chance to come out both in literal credential, but also in content with a specialization that you can apply in a specific context and potentially use to be able to transition into new areas of interest. And then finally, there is a very meaningful cohort community, and it is existing online, but then it's really reinforced by these residential seminars that you'll hear about, where people who choose to, and I know I saw Kara at one, so I know she's taken part in these, can really build community in person as well, even though, as you see in the chat, and as I'm sure you've seen in the materials, our students are around the world. So I'll just share a little bit about who benefits from the MLA today. We do have the benefit of having many different backgrounds reaching us. So people in all different industries, people with all different life experiences, but there are some commonalities, and you see 3 of them in our MLA students by the numbers. So one is that a majority of the students who find their way to the MLA actually hold 1 or more graduate degrees already. The most typical are professional degrees, so MBA, JD, MD. And what has happened is that they may have gotten that in their 20s, and now they're in their 40s, 50s, and they're thinking, you know what, I want to have this renaissance in the way that I'm looking at these issues. And so that's a common, although as you can see, there's also 41% for whom this is their first graduate degree. A second is that we have many people that are in executive leadership, many of them in the leadership and ethics concentration. And it really provides a really valuable way of looking at these issues and thinking about them from different perspectives, because in the same room, you'll have people that are looking at, for example, leadership across time and space, and they'll be looking at it from the perspective of someone who's been in these leadership roles and makes some of these tough decisions, and they'll have other people questioning them who might be younger and maybe thinking about this with a different generational context, asking questions, and that dialogue will really help to surface new ideas. And then on average, people in the MLA, although there is a range, have about 2 decades of professional experience. In terms of the attributes that we often talk about that we hope every student brings to the classroom, we pride ourselves on being a place where curious, rigorous, innovative, and collaborative people call us home. And it really makes for a very special learning community, because we are in a place where there's deep rigor, but there's also deep community. And one of the things we often talk about is that knowledge is constructed in the classroom, and that there is an incredible faculty member. They're eminent in their field. Often they're coining the terms that you're talking about, but their role is not to be a lecturer most of the time. Their role is to sometimes give mini lectures in context, but then really to facilitate dialogue. And one of the things that has amazed students in our classrooms is that people are coming having done the readings and very serious. And one of the benefits of the MLA is that people are typically pursuing it for both personal and professional growth. And so they often have extra incentive to be really serious students. And so it leads to a classroom where what you put in is also what you get out from your peers. But why should I be telling you about what it's like to be in an MLA classroom when indeed we have someone here who has been in these classrooms as a student and still is as a student? And so, Kara, I'm hoping we can kind of pick your brain. And I want to start with that why question, and then we'll come into your experience. Why did you choose to pursue the MLA in general? And then maybe you can talk a little bit about why you chose to pursue UChicago as your place for the MLA in particular.
Yeah, I think I probably fit into that profile of the students that you just gave here. And what was really important to me was to be in an environment where I was going to be able to explore, be curious, be humble, and be in a place where I'm exposed to and asking questions that would not necessarily be something that I was digging into in my day-to-day world. And that just came after 15 years in working and being a mom and being away from academics. I also found that, particularly working in high growth startups, you definitely get into a mode where you have a very myopic view of how to make what decision making is. And a lot of it is based on your immediate environment. And what we know and what we try to do in high growth companies and in startups is we want to be disruptors. We want to come in with a different perspective and a different point of view. And I found that part of the way I was approaching things was a little more consistent than I was comfortable with. And I was leaning on a lot of the frameworks that I had learned like early in my career with my first specialized, professionalized graduate degree. And I said, and especially as we were moving into a lot more complexities externally, things were getting more complex and complicated in the external environment. Both for myself, I had existential questions that I was asking myself that I didn't have a pathway to answer. And in my work, I was finding part of it, I was feeling a little stilted in that I wasn't having the exposure to the ideas and the knowledge that I thought were going to help me really contribute to the success of the businesses that I was in. So I started looking around, said, what are some different options? I actually started my MLA at Stanford and moved to the University of Chicago. And the reason that I like the University of Chicago for a couple of reasons. One is that at Stanford, and Stanford was a wonderful program. That's not what I'm here for, but I'm not here to denigrate them in any way. But the thing that I wanted that I really got at University of Chicago was, first of all, a broader set of courses and a broader pathway to learning in a number of different areas. Because it's a relatively large program, and you're always updating the courses, I had lots of different choices, and that was really interesting and exciting to me. I have landed on leadership and ethics because it directly relates to my professional goals. So I also had the opportunity to do two things. One is take a range of courses from an electives perspective, but also go deep in an area that was really a passion for me, which is leadership and ethics, and something that I take back to my work. So that was really important. The other thing that I really love about the University of Chicago, yes, the convenience of being in a virtual forced environment is really nice. But the thing that I didn't think about when I was applying, and I did realize the moment I got into my first class, was that also enables people from all over the world to be in your classroom. So of the 15 people that were in my last class, we had people dialing in from Taiwan and Europe and all different parts of the US. And I happened to be the only person that came from the San Francisco Bay Area in a tech environment. So we were talking use cases. We were talking about how to apply these in our different daily lives. And it was super enriching to be able to see that. And when we were reading Lao Tzu, we had someone who read this as a child and grew up in an environment where Lao Tzu was the preeminent philosophical perspective, so was able to translate that in the moment. So that's an example of the power of some of these elements that have been really fun.
And can I just ask one follow-up on this why side, and then we'll get into some of the details. As you think about the value of liberal arts education and how that has shaped your leadership, which is the focus that you've decided to take, how would you begin to describe the value for you personally and professionally?
Yeah, I think it's been immense. And a couple things. One is that, especially facing the uncertainty of things like a global pandemic and economic shifts that have been fairly dramatic, that don't follow the patterns that we're used to historically, I have had to problem solve in a very different way. And I've had to approach things extremely holistically. And having learned and gone deep into conceptual thinking, both with my on-site residents as well as with my virtual courses, has forced me to get better at how I construct the problems that I face, how I break them down, how I know how to bring in new information. I've been exposed to a lot of new ideas, so I'm able to come to the table. Quite literally, we were talking about stoicism. I was talking about stoicism with my boss, who happens to be the brother of Sam Altman, who is the founder of OpenAI, which developed ChatGPT. These are all very small worlds in which you don't think something like Stoic philosophy would have an impact, but it's definitely something that's informing our decision-making about how we're driving our organizations forward. Because if it works for Aurelius on a battlefield, odds are it's going to work for us in the competitive environment that we're living in. And just having a broader well of stories to tell and information to pull from can, in my perspective, only make you better. And I see that in action when I'm trying to look for different ways to communicate change and adaptation to change in the environments in which I'm leading.
Well, I want to continue this conversation with Kara. I'm just going to introduce a little bit more information about the MLA, come back, and not only will I ask questions to Kara in the next element, but we're also going to open it up to all of you to do so. And so let's jump into the MLA learning environment. And I'll just start with the most important, which is, here is an overview of what your curriculum would look like should you be accepted into the Master of Liberal Arts. You would take one course from each of our 4 divisions. And while you will have humanities and social sciences, you will also be expected to engage with the biological and physical sciences, but the courses will be taught by people who are adapting them for a generalist audience. So we'll look at neuroscience, we'll look at cosmology, but there will not be an expectation that you will know the complex mathematics or the detailed information in those areas. And while a cosmologist or a neuroscientist will teach it, they will do so in a way that is specifically adapted for a lifelong audience. And what we find at the university is we have an overwhelming group of people who are really eager to do this, because many of them want to contribute to the world of public ideas. And they find that this group of learners provides the incredible opportunity for them to be able to test out how they bring their ideas to the public. So one of our neuroscientists has been working on this trade book, which means they're trying to write it for a general audience. And she was immediate that she wanted to teach because she wanted to bring these ideas about how the brain develops to a group of people that are smart and really curious, but don't have a background in science necessarily and a PhD level as their foundation. And so that is the core of the curriculum. And it's a really exciting core for those who are curious, because I know for me, sitting in on many of these classes as someone whose background is in the humanities, it has just been so energizing to learn about areas that I really am curious about, but that are hard to peek into because of my lack of expertise in those domain areas. Then you get to take electives. And if you choose to, I'll talk about in a minute, you can concentrate those electives. And then we do insist, because we want to make sure that you are seeing the entire world. And there was a bias earlier, although we've moved beyond it, that some of our courses had a slightly more Western approach, that we wanted to make sure that everyone took a non-Western elective so that we made sure we represented the full assets of the university. And then finally, you do a thesis, and we'll talk about what that looks like in a moment. As I mentioned, those electives are a chance to concentrate. And so you've seen these 3 concentrations. They represent 3 really important areas of inquiry. How do you lead? How do you deeply understand the literary sciences? And then the new one that has just been launched and that we'll have an event for in 2 weeks with the SVP of Apple, who reports directly into the CEO, Tim Cook, is Tech and Society. And this has actually come about because we've already seen a lot of people like Kara who are in tech come to this degree saying, look, we figured out how to do the computer science or how to do the AI. And now, like Sam Altman and others, we're asking these big questions about, well, what is the right answer for society? And how can we use these for good? And so those are questions that rely, as much as stoicism as they do on technical capabilities. In terms of the thesis, this is a chance for you to go deep with a faculty member. And what is amazing about the theses is that every person has a different topic and really a personalized topic that represents their goal and discovery. What the MLA was originally designed to do was to be an all-access pass to a great university so that you could have this cognitive boot camp, but then that you could pursue a line of investigation that is interesting to you, typically in mid-career with 2 decades of experience under your belt. And so what happens in these projects is you see a real integration of people's intellectual interests and many times what they are doing professionally, and then they work with a tenured faculty member to be able to deeply look at that topic. And so you see here some examples of the types of projects that people have embarked on. These are some of the things that we'll talk to Karen in a moment about that we believe make the UChicago classroom unique. We keep our classes very small because we believe in an exchange of ideas. We are passionate about facilitation. So we are proud that many of our faculty are the world-class leaders in their fields, but the reason that they teach in the MLA is because they are excellent educators and they truly bring the love of learning into every classroom. We do keep what we hope to be a convenient format while still having the opportunity for in-person for those who choose it. And then this is a place where all viewpoints are welcome, and you may know that the university is fearless and relentless in our commitment to free expression. We believe when you combine that expression with diversity of viewpoints in a classroom, you have the best opportunity for true construction of knowledge. And one of our sayings that comes from Mortimer Adler that I love is that a lecture has the habit of going from the notes of the professor to the notes of the student without ever being in the mind of either. And so what we really pride ourselves on is dialogue-based discovery. I'll just share that we're very proud of the eminent faculty who make up our classrooms. This is unique as you maybe compare with other programs in the country. We do have the core faculty that are part of the research enterprise here to teach in the MLA. With Tech and Society and a couple others, we'll be bringing in some high-profile practitioners, but we really believe in the interplay of scholarship and practice. And so try to center that in all of the instruction that we provide. One thing that we've pointed out a few times is that while this is online, we do have the ability for people from around the world to have meaningful personal experience with one another. And that's through our residential seminar. And so in the autumn and spring, you can come to campus for a week and take a course in residence. And the way we've structured it is you complete the whole course in 1 week. There's a bit of pre-reading you do before you get to campus, and typically you complete your paper that you then submit afterward. But the class time is bunched with that kind of structure and planning so that people can actually have that in-person full student experience, can get to know their peers in that kind of in-person environment. And then surrounding it, we have a lot of campus events and other opportunities for you to really build connections, both with your peers and with the university. As an example, this upcoming autumn, we'll have the Pivotal Decade. It'll be taught by an endowed chaired professor, Ken Warren, who is one of the most respected in the field of English literature. And his course will be a particularly fun one because it's looking at literature and the rise of inequality. And as many of you know, Milton Friedman is well associated with the University of Chicago. It will essentially be how literary figures thought about the economics department of the University of Chicago by looking at writings. And it will be one of the many times that MLA students will see major debates between disciplines at the university. There are many supports that go alongside this, and I just want to name this because the University of Chicago is rigorous. But one of the things we've really worked hard to do while retaining that rigor is to make sure that we are equally focused on support and making sure that this is an accessible education that everyone, even if you've been out of the university for decades, even if maybe university wasn't your thing a couple decades ago and now you've had professional experience and you want to come and be part of it again, that we will be in a place where we can really support you in succeeding. All of these are very meaningful supports. I will say the one I hear the most about is Dean in terms of gratitude from our students is writing support. We have a person who is dedicated to supporting your writing. Most of the courses have writing-based assignments. And there are students who every class set up time with our writing instructor and who are having her read their papers, provide feedback, and get extra support. There are also tutorials throughout the program that are available to all to really help you sharpen that skill. And it's also one of the outcomes that therefore comes through this program. People become better writers. And we believe at the university that better writing is actually a function of better thinking, because better writing reflects being able to have that synthetic approach and really know what message you want to say, and then being able to actually deliver it on the page. But here again, why should I be telling you when you could hear from a source that is actually in the classroom? And so, Kara, I want to come back to you, and I have a couple questions. We're going to open up to others, and I know you have a commitment tonight at 6:40 Chicago time, so we'll make sure to get you out of here in 8 minutes accordingly. You are now into many classes, right? You've been part of this program for more than a year. Can you just talk a little bit about what the educational experience is like and who is in the classroom with you?
Yeah, well, I can speak both to the residential because I did a week on site, and then I can also speak to the virtual classes. So I'll start with the residential. I did a spring course, and it was awesome because it was a group of about, I don't know, 15 of us, and it was intensive. We were literally sitting around a table, spring outside, and we were talking about medieval poetry, and then talking about 1950s movies. So it was a full it was a survey course. It was us and our professor and a professor and a TA. And what we did was a little bit of reading ahead of time. And what we would do is each night our reading or the movie would be it would be not so much that it was overwhelming, but it was enough to where we could read it in the evening and come back to talk about it the next day so that everything was top of mind. It was over the course, I think it was a Saturday to a Sunday, and it was full time. By the time I came home, I was really tired. My brain was tired, but it was a special time, and I still talk to friends that I made in that course. That was the really awesome part of it, is not just the professors and what you learn, but you're in with some really interesting people that have different perspectives than you and are challenging you. And it's amazing, as many of us have probably experienced in undergrad and beyond, is how you can read one thing and everybody can see something different in it. So definitely saw that diversity of thought, and really amazing folks sitting around the table. Everybody from an individual that was doing really strong work with social justice, and particularly African-American social justice in Chicago, two retired CEOs from really impressive companies, and then folks that one individual was new to the teaching profession. So just really interesting, really exciting. And we got to hang out on campus and have drinks afterwards and go out to dinner and go to plays in Chicago. So it was pretty special. In the virtual environment, it was similar to what I discussed before. We had about 15 people from all over the world. We would convene on a weekly basis. We'd have a reading, and then we would contribute a short, a couple hundred words response to that reading prior to, so we all knew sort of where everybody stood. And then we would have a guided conversation facilitated by a professor during that period of time. Now, I think the big question that a lot of new students had, I know I had, was like, oh my gosh, like grades and the final papers and all those things. And Seth, I do have to say, it was helpful to get the support on the writing. I had the professors in these courses, especially knowing that they're teaching career professionals, they understand where we are, and they also want us to succeed. It's not the dynamic where you're trying to get that A and they want a grade on a curve. It's really, we all win together in this. And then you're building relationships with people in your classes, and people were so generous with wanting to help each other and making sure that those papers were good and were completed. And eventually it took me a lot less time than I thought it would actually to complete the papers. I think one was 10 pages, the other was 15, and you have plenty of time to do all of that. I think the total time was about 3 hours a week outside of the class, which was 3 hours for me, in terms of the virtual course.
Well, so I want to make sure that we open up to any questions in the room for you, Kara, before you need to exit. And so let me just open up if you want to chat in any questions for Kara, or if you want to just raise your hand using our reactions button, or I believe, I'm going to look at our settings, I'm going to make sure you can unmute directly should you, great, yes, you are all able to unmute. So questions you have, don't be shy. Anything you want to know from Kara? Well, I mean, can I ask one final question, Kara, in lieu of others, which is, can you just talk a little bit about how it felt to be back in the classroom again? That's a question that we often hear, like, I really want to do this, I just don't know what it'll be like to be a student again after,
For sure. Well, the good news is it is like riding a bike. You get back in, you're around almost everybody else who's nervous when the class starts, and then you have a professor that's really engaged and helps facilitate that. So I think it's exactly the feeling I had when, I was going to be a freshman in high school. But it was also really exciting to get new books and have a syllabus and know all the cool things that you're going to learn. So it was a really great experience, both fronts, being on campus and being in a virtual environment. And having done both, I can say, I don't know which one I would say was a better or more, like I learned more in one versus the other. They were very different, but equally impactful in terms of the learning that I had.
Well, Kara, thank you. We are very fortunate to have you in our student body and grateful for your time, and good luck continuing to navigate the ever evolving tech world
Yes.
moment.
Thank you. Thanks, Seth. Thanks,
Bye, Kara. Well, so that is actually a great segue to talk about timeline and details, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Carrie Dempsey.
Everyone. So we have a couple of deadlines that are coming up very, very soon. Our application deadline for the autumn is September 7th. And while that may seem like, oh, it's still several weeks away, there are quite a few steps in the application process, which we're going to go through in just a second, and it does take some time. So if you're thinking about applying for autumn, please start your application this week if you haven't already. In terms of the application process, one is we do ask everyone to submit a writing sample. The writing sample can be something that you may already have, whether that's something you wrote in a different academic environment or a report maybe you've written for work. We are open-minded in terms of what we look at here. If you're uncertain if something would work for this, feel free. We have Tom Shannon on the call with us today. He's our enrollment counselor, and I'm sure several of you have already spoken to Tom. You can email it to us. We'll take a look at it. Tom will help us look at it, and we'll provide you feedback, and we'll let you know, hey, this works, this doesn't work. If you don't have anything that might work as your writing sample, we also have students write a review of a play or a movie that they saw, and that can work as well. The candidate statement, this is a very important part of your application. It lets us know why you're interested in our program, why you're interested in coming to the University of Chicago. We ask students when they don't, the time that you save with your writing sample and hopefully repurposing something you may already have, you really put that time into this candidate statement because we take it so seriously as a part of this process. You also need to submit 2 letters of recommendation. These can either be letters of recommendation from someone who knows you from an academic setting or a professional recommendation from work. Transcripts need to be submitted. However, during the application process, we ask that you just submit unofficial transcripts. If you're admitted to the program, then prior to the first day of class, then you'll need to submit those official transcripts to us. a copy of your CV or resume, if necessary, test scores if you don't meet the English proficiency requirements. And then we do have a $75 application fee, but because you are joining us tonight, we do waive that fee, and Tom can help you coordinate that ahead of submitting the application. That is the point where you do formally submit your application to us. And then the next phase of the application process is that we will reach out to you to schedule an interview to talk a bit deeper with you. Those are usually about a half-hour long and take place with a member of our team and alumni of the program. And this is really not your a test of your liberal knowledge or liberal arts knowledge, excuse me. It's more just to maybe answer some questions that we've had as we were reviewing the application and just to get to know you a little bit better. If you're admitted to the program, there's a few different ways that you can look to help fund your education. One is that we do have merit scholarships available. If you are interested in being considered for a scholarship, please submit your application very, very soon, as we are already reviewing applications for scholarship consideration. We also have some students use different types of loans to help fund their education. If you do take 2 to 3 courses in a given quarter, you can use federal financial aid. If you are taking only 1 course in a quarter, which many of our students do, you can also look to private loans. And then any of our potential students who are currently working, we always encourage you to look and see what your employer's tuition reimbursement benefits are. A lot of employers offer this. There is true value, as you've heard tonight, to your employer for completing this program. And so check with HR, understand what those are, and if you're able to use those to support funding your education.
Well, that is all that we have. And so I'm going to take down our screen because it's time for questions, and we really want to make a visual shift here so that you can see that we are looking to you and eager to hear what you want to know from us. And so again, welcome to chat in, welcome to raise your hand, but also welcome to shout out. We keep these intimate for the very purpose of being interactive. So what do you want to know? Chris, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Seth. I'm sorry, I have three questions, but 2 of them are, I think, pretty straightforward and simple. The residential seminar you mentioned, that doesn't count for any credit, formal credit for the completion of the degree. Is that correct?
Oh, I'm so sorry if we missed stating. It is absolutely full credit. It's a full course. So it does have the same core dimensions. So essentially a full course has, significant reading, significant assessment, and 30 contact hours. And then you're kind of mastering a subject, so that's kind of the way that we think about it. Now, usually what we do is we take 3 instructional hours and we put them once a week in the evening, spread over 10 weeks. But the way that the residential seminar is approached is, depending on the professor, we typically put something like 24 of those hours on that residential seminar week. And then there might be a Zoom once beforehand as you kind of prep for that week. And then there might be one after, and then typically you have time after to submit your paper. But yes, it's a full course. And the nice thing is that your tuition covers that course. So, when you pay for that course, you are paying for the residential seminar. It does mean, though, that your lodging and things of that sort are at your own initiative, if that makes sense.
Okay. And it sounded as if, in terms of paper requirements, is it roughly like 20 pages for one course? That's kind of what I was picking up from Cara.
I think that's a good rule of thumb. Each professor will have their own approach. So some may have you each week do like a 300 to 500 word response paper, and then you'll end up with a shorter final paper. So it varies, but I think thinking about, 20 pages as a course, is the right magnitude, even though that'll look different in every class, if that makes sense.
what do most students end up doing in terms of the number of courses per, I'm sorry, is it a semester or quarter system? It's semester system, right?
Yeah, so we're the quarter system, and
Oh,
so
it's
there are
quarter
4 quarters in a year. Although
Okay,
we see less student enrollment in summer
sure.
because many people like to take it off.
Okay, okay. Um, my third question is, it's kind of a philosophical question, I guess. U Chicago is known, or was known for years, for the great books curriculum.
Yeah.
And um, and of course, since that time, critical theory has come in, and um, I like both critical theory and the great books. So I'm not, this isn't either or, but is there a kind of focus with the program one way or the other, or is it integrating the traditional curriculum with new ways of thinking about, literature and the humanities, etc.?
Yeah, so I would say the latter is what we strive toward and where we are. And there was a really interesting set of debates, as you may have followed, around kind of classic texts. And
Sure.
there was one from someone who's very active with our school, Shani Barch-Zimmer, who's a professor at the University of Chicago, and wrote a very compelling piece in the Washington Post, and it ended up being kind of one of these seminal moments in terms of this discussion. And what she said is, yes, there are major problems with only looking to the great books, and yet there is still value in the great books. And so I think that's the view that we have, which is a yes and approach. We think there remains a lot of value in these books, and we think it's essential that people see all of the texts that have a huge role in influencing the way we think and in expressing different human and lived experiences. And so we've worked very hard to make sure that the curriculum today reflects a much broader and more inclusive canon. But the way that we got there was not by throwing out Aristotle or Plato. It was by bringing in many other texts and making sure that Toni Morrison and others, are also reflected in the curriculum. And, I think this is a kind of hallmark UChicago. We rarely cancel ideas, but we very eagerly try to invite more ideas, and we want more ways of thinking and divergent perspectives in, every curriculum. So I hope that's helpful.
Very, very helpful. No, and I would feel very comfortable with that approach. So thank you.
Thank you. Lauren, I see your question, and Chris, I think you were aiming toward it, which is, the normal pace that people complete the degree. So I would describe it as a range from one course being probably the norm, but there are students who are pursuing 3 courses sometimes in a quarter. So there are a few considerations in this regard. One of the benefits of this degree, as compared to many others, is that we really do allow you to set your pace. And so for people that are working professionally, and you heard Kara also has 2 kids, and so that's a lot to be executive at a tech company in this moment, and a really active parent. So someone, typically in that kind of profile is doing the 1 course per quarter. They want to be in a place where they can integrate it into their lives. There are also people who come in and they may have a reason why they want to complete the degree in a certain time frame, and they may also be in a place where their calendar allows them. We often have people that their kids have just launched and they now have time and they're actually really eager to dig in. And some of them will complete the degree in an academic year, and they'll do that by taking 3. So there's a range, but when we look at the median is that 1 course per quarter. So that's the typical student, but we definitely see students across those variations. We have another question here from Hajat. I'd like to learn more about the thesis project. How broad are the thesis topics? Can the thesis advisors be anyone? How do students normally select a thesis project? So I'll share a little bit, but I'm going to turn it over to Callie, because Callie's actually worked with a lot of students on their theses. And so big picture, the answer is yes, you can truly choose your thesis topic. It can be broad. The key is to be able to convince your faculty advisor that you can actually contribute unique and distinctive knowledge, even if the topic is broad. So the challenge often with a broader topic is, can you really say something that is going to be, compelling and distinct, in, you know, a huge topic like the history of humanity, it'd be really hard to contribute, you know, something that you feel like is unique in that. But there may be other topics where, because of your expertise, a broad approach may be a fit. So we don't have an answer to that. You know, it's case by case, but I think the question is, can you mix broad with that kind of distinctive contribution? And yes, it can be anyone actually from any of the divisions. So sciences, humanities, and beyond. And sometimes even from our professional schools, Crown, Harris, and Booth. And then the process is actually supported. So students are welcome as a student to reach out to faculty, but we also support you and help you to navigate. And so, I mean, Callie, can I turn it over to you? Because you've helped a lot of people to navigate those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So the writing advisor that was touched on earlier, who's amazing, her name is Millie Ray, and she works specifically with our MLA students to help them hone their thesis project. So there's a kind of set structure where the first quarter that you begin working on your thesis, you are doing that with the helping hand of that writing advisor. So you can come in with no idea and she'll help you kind of germinate an idea. You can come in with something that really interested you from one of the classes you took, something that interested you before you even started the MLA. And she's going to be the person that has so much experience on her side and helping you find that, like Seth was saying, the balance between broadness and scope in terms of making it a really, viable and productive thesis. And then she also is going to be the person who will help you think of a thesis advisor if there's no one you know of. She knows the faculty well, and sometimes she also works with me and Tim to find people who are professionals in the field that you're hoping to write about. And that includes special projects as well. So we've had some people do screenplays. So we had a student write a book, which was way longer than a 2-quarter process, but it is all doable. And there's a lot of guidance through the process as well.
And then I see, Taylor, your question about timing. The classes are 6 to 9 p.m. Chicago time, which translates, as you probably know, to 4 to 7 p.m. Pacific time. They're all also Saturday morning classes, which I believe are 9 to noon, which would translate into an early morning for you, but then you'd have your full Saturday still to be able to get out into the world. So it would be 7 to 10 your time. And we did choose those with the thinking of how it could relate to broad geographies, including for some of our students in Europe and Asia. That Saturday class in particular is really vital because it, obviously is very hard for 6 to 9 p.m. from a European time zone. And that is actually possible depending on where you are in Asia, but for many in, China or Hong Kong, the Saturday is really the course as well. Other questions that you may have? Well, thank you. We will stay around, so I will be in this room if anyone has a question they want to ask individually. But we will call this the end of the formal information session and class dismissed, so to speak. Thank you for being part of our classroom tonight, and we look forward to continuing conversations with many of you about your candidacies in the Master of Liberal Arts. Have good evenings, or depending on your geography, good afternoons.
Okay, Seth?
Yeah, please go for it, Chris.
Yeah.